All right. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining the last IALD Middle East interview of the year. Today, we're going to be chatting with a bunch of people. If you can see, we're going to chat with folks from Light Touch PLD. We have 40 North Design with us, as well as WSP. And we're going to be chatting about Atlantis the Royal, which was the winner of the Project of the Year, the Ultimate Award at Light Middle East this year. So congratulations to all of you for that win. But before we get into all of the details about the design and the project, I want to remind you of a few things. First of all, the webinar is being recorded and it will be available via the IALD YouTube channel. If you want to share your questions with our guests, please write them down in the Q&A section and we will answer them towards the end of the interview. For those of you who don't know who we are, the IALD is the International Association of Lighting Designers, and we focus on promoting the importance of lighting design in the construction industry all around the world. And if you are interested in becoming a member of our association, you can visit our website at www.iald.org, or you can email us at middleeast@iald.me. So with all of that out of the way, let me introduce to you all of our guests. And I'm going to start with Paul Miles. Paul started his lighting career back in 1994, and he has been in the Middle East since 2007, when he established the lighting design department at WSP. He is now design director and partner at Light Touch PLD, based in Dubai, where he has designed and led an extensive list of projects that include hotels, commercial and retail spaces, and many more. Outside of the lighting world, he is known for being a football coach, a golfer, and a lover of horse riding. So it's good to have you here with us, Paul.
Horse racing, not riding. I wouldn't put that on the horse.
Okay, well, racing it is. Sorry about that. Next up is Sophia Stezenko. Sophia is a principal lighting designer at Light Touch PLD. Since she joined back in 2014, she has been a cornerstone of the team, spearheading the boutique hospitality pillar with a focus on high-end hospitality and F&B projects. Before joining Light Touch, Sophia worked in Italy, where she honed her skills in lighting systems development and architectural and event lighting projects. Outside of the lighting world, Sophia enjoys baking, traveling, beach volleyball, and riding motorcycles on open roads. Is that right, Sophia?
As much as possible, thanks, yeah. Hi.
Moving on, we are going to introduce Theresa Enroth. Theresa joined Light Touch in June of 2018, bringing over 25 years of transformative experience to her role as the Associate Lighting Designer and Post-Contract Team Lead. Theresa's journey is in lighting, has unfolded through the realms of light performances, architectural marvels, and intricate installations. Outside of lighting, Theresa enjoys a good wine, good music, and science fiction, not necessarily in that order. And she has this idea of venturing to Mars with a human space mission. So welcome, Theresa.
And I have to satisfy myself now with just Lego, space Lego.
Well, who knows? Who knows what SpaceX will bring us next? Next up is Peggy Tan. Peggy is based in Singapore, and she has had a prolific and illustrious career in lighting, which spans over 20 years. As design director of Project Lighting Design, also known as PLD, Peggy helps spearhead the global consultancy firm through a broad spectrum of local and international projects. She is also an adjunct lecturer at Temasek Polytechnic in Singapore. It's a pleasure to have you here. All right, next up we have Liam O'Connell. Liam is an Associate Director for Building Services at WSP. He is an experienced and respected chartered electrical engineer and building services design manager with 17 years of experience in retail and commercial developments, fit-outs, high-rise luxury hotels, residential accommodations, technical advisory roles, and peer review assignments. It is also a pleasure to have you here with us, Liam.
Thank you.
And finally, I will introduce John Galloway. He is the one joining us from the furthest. He is in the US. John is the founder and creative director of 40 North, a company he started 19 years ago. But he has been in the industry for 30 years, designing luxury resorts hospitality projects. John has collaborated with many talented people to create some of the most sought after luxury hospitality experience on the planet. A fun fact about John, he is a fourth generation cattle rancher. Welcome, John.
Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Well, as you can see, we have a lot of people today because this project, as Paul described it to me, is like many projects all rolled into one. So, Paul, why don't you go ahead and give us an introduction and tell us where this all started and how this engagement came to you?
Good question. I think in the typical form of an RFP, we received an RFP for this project, and in Middle East standard, you tend to get some RFPs with some crazy ideas and a little bit out of the ordinary ideas. So some of them you take as a pinch of salt, and others you take a little bit more serious. This particular one was a little bit more serious, and when we started delving into the detail of it, we were a conservative 7 designers at the time of bidding for this job. So because of our association with PLD in Singapore, we straight away realized that we couldn't do this alone. It would be not sensible or feasible, to be honest. So we quickly partnered up with Stephen and Peggy and team, using resources from Bangkok and Singapore, as well as Dubai, to put together the fee proposal. It was a significant one. I think I remember doing it on holiday in Thailand at the time, which pleased the family a lot, but it was a worthwhile exercise. We ended up winning the project on the premises of delivering the design within a 2-year period, which I think we'll find out later on in the call that was extended slightly from the initial expectation. Getting to the realms and the initial introductions into the project, and one of the things that really stood out for us was the diverse amount of collaboration we had, and not only with numerous architects, interior designers, luckily one landscape designer in John and team, one MEP designer in WSP, but literally all of the collaborations and consultants we worked with were, we had Canadian-based, US-based, that's New York and Kansas. We had obviously ourselves in Singapore and Dubai. We had consultants in Australia, as well as Paris, London, all over the world. And initially, as you can imagine, this was pre-COVID, so conference calling was not as efficient, if you like, as it probably is now. It was a bit more primitive. So there was a lot more travel involved as well. So it was a scary thought, but we sensibly split up our team into various sectors, ones that are focused and have worked with different parties before, and that collaboration become easier. And to be fair, without the extended team being so collaborative and brilliant to work with, it would have been a bit more of a chore than it ended up being. But it was super exciting, and we're working with some of the best interior designers, architects, and landscape designers worldwide. So it was a very brilliant experience going through the motions.
Interesting. And you mentioned in our call that this was like many projects all rolled into one. So was that happening right from the beginning, or did it just roll in as you got more and more involved with the project?
We understood the scale of the project. It was quite definitive, the brief. There was a large hotel component, residential component, and naturally, you know, that's quite typical in the Middle East. It's not until you start reading how many floors this thing had, the floor plate of this thing, you actually then realized it's actually a little bit more significant than your typical mixed use development. So you know, just some rough numbers: 795 rooms, 102 suites, 44 suites with pools, and 17 on-site restaurants, including 8 which are Michelin star chef restaurants. So you can imagine that's extensive. Another little number for you is 93 swimming pools on site, so which is quite significant. But the unique thing about developing this particular project was when we were dividing up the spaces, everything was phased. So initially, when we got engaged, we were targeting hotel and residential. All the F&B was yet to be decided. So design evolution over time was also a key factor and quite hard to manage. So yeah, it wasn't a case of, you know, hitting various areas at the same time. There was an element of a step process, but nevertheless, it was still challenging. And we were working in parallel with Singapore, was active at the same time as us. We ended up with a concept document we presented over in New York, which was 374 pages long. So you can imagine, and that particular concept report was refined to visuals. And we were very clearly advised that the client did not want tons of text or technical data. They literally wanted hard-hitting visuals to clearly understand the design intent. And I think the prep of our initial concept presentation was months, and we ended up expediting it in the space of 20 minutes. It was quite interesting, the pressures we were under in New York to do that. I think Sophia will remember that little period, and Stephen was with us from Singapore as well. It was quite, I think John, you were there as well in the meeting, wasn't you? It was yeah, quite a unique experience, but luckily we had 2 minor comments on that concept. So the hard work over the previous months definitely paid off. And then we pushed forward with the design.
And in terms of the concept, you know, in very brief words, what was the main concept that you proposed to the client that really caught their attention? Well,
I mean, from an area perspective or components of the project, I'll let the guys go into that from a hotel facade landscape perspective. But one of the key things we embedded into the design concept was the architecture was quite consistent throughout. So it was consistent whether we had 5 key entrances and 3 front entrances or 3 access points to the development. And although there was consistency in the architectural feel, we had to give identity to each one of those entrances. So one of the things we brought to the table was we made up words, and for some reason we picked the letter E. I don't know why we picked the letter E, Sophia, but each one of them was a reference to the letter E, just to elaborate on how we approach the lighting within those spaces. For example, the ballroom conference entrance was exuberant, and then, you know, the residence was elegant, but we had to diversify the lighting in the spaces in those areas to give a unique experience within a consistent architecture, if that makes sense. So that was one of the big conceptual directions. And then I don't want to spoil it for everyone else going into their components, but the whole process started off from the architecture and the facade treatment, and then as we gradually went into the spaces and collaborated with the various interior designers, everything had its own signature. It was its own dedicated project because, you know, although there was an element of consistency through common areas, each individual restaurant or space was completely diverse. And just the all-day dining alone is not just a single restaurant. It's actually a restaurant divided into 12 to 14 restaurants. So it's yeah, even that's significant in its own right from a single eatery. So yeah, no, it's quite interesting, but I think before I ruin Sophia's piece, I better be quiet.
well, don't worry, because I'm going to ask her next. And you said something interesting. You know, let's walk this project from the outside in. So let's start with the facade. Sophia, why don't you tell us a little bit of what happened with the facade? Where did you get started with that?
Actually, yeah, we were counting the years backwards because it's been quite a while. I think it was one of the first areas that started to be developed, facade and landscaping. Peggy, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was, I think, back in 2015 when we did the first drawing packages, etc. So that was the one to kick off. And I think that was also the one that in the presentation for us was kind of at that time quite developed, that we did coordinate also internally with the landscape team a lot with respect to the look and feel, what happens during the different times of the day. Paul had, we were looking actually at the older presentation we did, and I can just bring it up for reference. So to walk you through some of these renders or impressions and intents that we did at the time. And as Paul mentioned, obviously the key of the architecture, let me just try to share the screen. Perfect. So yeah, main inspirations for the architecture, really that architecture itself being unique in its way of being blocks floating, and a symbol also of Atlantis, the opening. So the architecture has become the symbol actually. What we at an early stage had the chance with the key architects from KPF, Eli and his team, to kind of coordinate and discuss the vision they had, but also what we could, how we could enlight it. So we had initially the pure kind of static lighting, and then thought to bring in the mystic of Atlantis being underwater, with having maybe a projection that kind of ripples across the building as it goes. We with them also discussed and established hierarchies as kind of the architecture from their vision was a lot about the block ends that you can see here on the warm lit elements that are protruding out. Whilst the secondary was the fascia of the building, which we kept more in dark and illuminated by internal balconies only. So that also gave a bit of rhythm, let's say, or randomness to it. And the block ends, we elaborated with them. So we developed kind of integrated lighting details to ensure there's consistency, but also no visibility of sources. As you can see here, several elements to the rich color of the baguettes, but also having the frame as an element that in the evening or night we saw as being something that could be only lit, for example. So you give that differentiation during the various times of the day and night. And then the water effect as additional.
Just to add something to that, Sophia, if you don't mind, with the block ends, one of the challenges or some of the internal block ends were opaque, and the architect specifically wanted to create depth, so it gave the impression that there was something beyond. So the layering of light allowed that to happen. We wanted to pick up the finish. The halo is actually for the far vista view, because when the further you are away from the building, you see definitively the frame, and then as you get closer, you start seeing the depth of the terracotta finish. It was terracotta initially, but a terracotta finish, and then the depth of the glazing beyond. And then, sorry, Sophia, then you're going to talk about
actually, you jumped in at the right moment. I think I remember also studies you did from the far vista coming, approaching the building, but also what is more prominent from a close vista was then the differentiation between the podium and the towers. So the towers are really the ones for the residential as well as for the hotel that are standing out, and the podium, something that is quite complex, but you see it as you approach it or when you are a guest.
Something else to just maybe add on that is with the from the previous slide as well, with one of the challenges with the facade is there was nothing to light, and one of the directions that Sophia mentioned with the block ends was the key focus. There was a full reliance on life in the building to give the main fascias light, so that gave us an opportunity to be super efficient and integral with the lighting. So we didn't get any light spill, we didn't have any impact dark sky, everything was contained within particular frames, elements, and so on. So Sophia done a brilliant job with a very hard job with mocking up this block end in the desert on one of the initial stages to ensure the light was consistent, completely concealed, and achieving those aspects. Sorry, Sophia.
I think we were quite lucky that we had opportunities with these mock-ups, starting with the marketing suite, and then really being able to cross-check various types of fixtures, the lit effect, the color temperature we were discussing with the architect. So there was an opportunity having actual materials to light them and see whether 27 or 3000 Kelvin was preferred on the overall view, having those different elements. Paul was referring to the shadow boxes, which we, developed with the fritted glass to see how much actually it can pick up the light. So that was a big opportunity.
And these mock-ups, I'm pretty sure, also helped you understand how to conceal the lights as well, right? Because from going from the drawing or from the rendering to reality, there's always a lot of differences, right?
Yeah, the devil in the detail. But I think that's the beauty when we have the mock-ups where we can really test. And I feel that's also important in this region, really, for the clients understanding that there's a major benefit in having them.
And to be fair, the architect was very open to adaptation to accommodate the lighting. Right. It's sometimes a challenge in what we do regularly with whether it's facade or even interiors, to be fair. Once a base design's set, to then place lighting integral with it is sometimes people push back on what they can and can't do to create details and so on. But it was a brilliantly collaborative exercise where anything that was requested to get the lighting right was implemented, and that was one of the successes, I think, through the mock-up and everything else of the facade, because of that flexibility and that change.
I would agree completely. And at the same time, we were envisioning to bring in color, and that was, like, for example, a pushback by the architects who love to see it only in white, but we're trying to understand also client's requirement, being able to do a UAE flag or something else during different stages. So that's just a kind of recollab of the elements that we have considered for the facade lighting, which also on the podium, we try to establish kind of a language that comes at certain areas and we can differentiate. And as Paul mentioned, the idea was to characterize the areas or reflect the character of a residential entrance, being more intimate, whilst the hotel was really something to wow. It was huge also in the dimensions. Is huge in the dimensions, and ballroom being more flexible. We were trying to push for color, but it was kind of a little bit limited. So yeah, if you want to go, we can just flick through maybe the renders or sketch up first what we envisioned and advised on elements.
This actually explained a little bit on how we done the collaboration, because initially we done a yellow pencil exercise. I'm going to say Sophia done a yellow pencil exercise. she's the talent. She done a yellow pencil exercise on the facade elements, just to express and almost do a return brief to the architectural team to say, this is what we've understood, this is how we're proposing to do it. And throughout these sketches, it was obviously highlighting areas for accent as well as forms of hierarchy, etc. But what's also a key point is that we were never focusing on an element on its own. It was always considering the backdrop. Part of the architecture, especially now on this level with the framed entrances and so on, there's each one of those entrances is supported with an aperture behind it. And it was such a key focus for both client and architect that every time we showed a render or anything else, we weren't to render just the foreground. It was certainly the background was as important, and that connectivity with the background to ensure there was that overall look and feel and collaboration.
And landscape, correct. And Peggy's team also, we were cross-sharing renders, for example, to ensure that we are reflecting correctly, or they are reflecting correctly the approach for facade or lighting in the landscaping. There's some feature elements that the architect has been really particular about. For example, the porte cochere and the envisioned James Turrell alike opening. So that was a beautiful, and I feel still one of the most beautiful elements of the facade when you enter. And there was a collaborative effort together with the interior designer, GA, for the hotel entrance to have the chandelier together with KPF, the architects, and ourselves to develop a chandelier where we can integrate the lighting that kind of is intricate, but provides functional lighting without, seeing typical downlight elements. So that was quite a unique element, I would say. And that's also Theresa's input or site support has been enabling it to become realized.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And basically, you're also setting the mood for what you're going to find inside, right? Because now that we are halfway through the interview, I would actually like to start walking indoors and start finding out, like, what happened then in the interiors, right? So I believe Peggy was very involved with the hotel part of the project. So Peggy, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what happened there and what was special about it. And I'm pretty sure that Liam and John will maybe chime in to a little bit about what happens in
If
the
they get a word
interiors
in
and the
edgeways between us.
collaboration.
Actually, with Liam's team, there's been a lot of efforts, for example, for the facados on the driver locations, etc. So thankfully, that has worked out. Peggy, shall I share and you can take over?
Sure.
And just so you know, we started getting questions, but for all our listeners, I will come back to them towards the end of the interview, okay? So Peggy, yeah,
Thank you,
the
Maria.
floor is yours.
Hang on, let me. Uh, okay, I'm sharing the screen now. Is it visible?
Yeah, we see a presentation that says elegance.
Ah, great. Yes. So my section is elegant, according to what, as Paul said earlier, we had the letter E and the different water concepts that we assigned to each section of the project. And earlier on, you've heard Sophia give us a really nice introduction to the hotel entrance. It's really, I think, one of the, I would say, a favorite part of the project for me, because the whole arrival experience is simply really mesmerizing, and it was really designed to inspire and awe, starting from the porte cochere, where I think Sophia's team did a great job to highlight all the architectural features such as the screens, and she's mentioned this unique chandelier feature that is in place of the downlights. And as you walk into the lobby, you are greeted by these waterfalls that are uplit with lighting. And coming into the lobby, it's actually really a monumental space with very high ceilings. It's very open, and there's many features happening. And the central feature would be this droplet sculpture that was designed by the interior designer GA. It forms the centerpiece of the lobby. And the funny thing was, whenever we talked about the lighting concept for this space, people would ask us, so how are you lighting the sculpture? And then we would say, well, we're not lighting the sculpture because
I was going to ask Peggy.
Yes, it took a while to convince the client and the team that it's a polished mirrored surface, and you don't light it because you don't want to have funny reflections all over the place. It's really meant to be left alone and to serve as a mirror and reflect the surroundings. So if you actually visit the hotel, you can see that the key feature is not lit. And the design by GA is really very sleek, contemporary. They had this narrative going through the hotel, which introduces different elements of water throughout the whole experience and in different forms. It could be sculptures such as the droplet sculpture. And then you see in their rendering here, they have these glass lids with the water cascading down. And then beyond that, you see these fantastic aquariums. And behind the aquariums, there are actually LED screens that so it's very unique. It's like an artwork with real aquatic animals and also artistic ones that are displayed in the LED screens. And so there was actually a lot to deal with. So how we approach the lighting really is looking at it as a very clean canvas. And we wanted to really respect the interior designer's concept because everything is so clean and pristine and crisp, and there's a certain purity and calmness to the space. And the challenge with lighting high spaces is, you do need quite a lot of lighting equipment. So one of the mandate we had was really just to take a very tailored and very mannered approach to how we lay out the lighting in the ceilings to make sure that everything looks really mannered and very architectural. We had a lot of downlights, but they are all grouped together so that it doesn't really clutter up the ceiling. And we sort of bathe the lobby in a blanket of light with accentuation to certain features. Of course, we had to be very careful about how we deal with the reflectivity of the materials around. I think the aquarium was one consideration where we tried not to have lights too close to the aquarium. And so in this rendering here, in the previous rendering, you see sort of an ideal situation where you look out and you see the beautiful landscape. But in reality, we know that's not going to happen. In the nighttime, you get reflections of the lighting in the facade glass, and you see the cove lighting and all the vertical illuminated features reflected in the glass. And it was something that bothered us a little bit at the beginning, but we reckon that it was something we had to live with. So you see here how we've touched up the rendering to show that the realistic situation.
How did the client receive that feedback in terms of the reflections? Is that something that they felt, oh, this is not going to work, or were they a little bit receptive about it?
Yeah, I think in the end they were receptive. That maybe something Paul can share because I think he did most of the convincing.
That discussion happened, and it was deemed as almost a risk at the start. But what we did to help compensate that, as part of the an added value thing, we designed these what we call them the fireflies, but they're lights actually outside the glazing, which helps connect the space a little bit better. And the other thing that I think people were struggling to appreciate was the scale. So the human scale of looking out of that window, and as you can just see with that render that was shown, that a lot of the reflectivity, and it was toned really far down in the evening, you still got the main vista of the landscape and Milos, which is the restaurant opposite, and elements of the fire show. And when you're actually standing down, if you can imagine scale, you know that those lights come up just beyond waist height, with those table lamps, sorry, in the background. So you don't actually, it doesn't actually disrupt the view as much as you would in a typical scale environment, shall we say. But you know, as Peggy said, we've done various studies and even try to encourage the interior designer not to use ambient lights and more focus lights, so they were dedicated to the space and so on. But yeah, so that was the story of reflection. Sorry, Peggy.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Paul. So what you see on the screen here is a photo, a professional photo, and I think it shows how close the actual implemented design result was close to the design intent. And this is a view of the reception. So other than how we deal with the lighting to the large features, there were also various accents introduced throughout the space to bring things to a human scale. So for example, these large fins here, we had applied uplighting to the sides. And in the background, you see these are the reception counters, which are sculptural elements that float out of the water. And there was lighting to accentuate that floating feeling as well. And one of the features in GA's design is having all these very tailored and vertical elements that are repeated throughout the hotel. And we had a very specific lighting approach to these. And then this is
Liam, I'm curious about something. You know, hotels tend to have a lot of things that happen behind the ceiling, and lighting is definitely not one of them. So how can you tell us a little bit, how was that collaboration between Peggy's team, Paul's team, and your team to make sure that everything sort of worked together and there were no, you know, clashes?
Yeah, look, from a design perspective, as Paul mentioned, you know, there was 17 F&B offerings throughout the hotel. And one of the challenges was that a restaurant had sometimes a different interior designer, they had a different celebrity chef design representative. And this meant that we were constantly working with different design teams. And I suppose the key thing was to make sure that both parties made sure that we worked side by side throughout the process and to understand each other's way of working. And as time went on, we got better, you know, throughout each area. Initially, you know, this was a learning experience. However, as it evolved, we knew what information the other party needed, how it needed to be presented, and when it would be delivered, and such as like was say the wattage of fittings, the control channels, and that allowed the WSP in turn then to design the circuitry, the size of the lighting control panels, the size of cables, and of course that fed into the project timeline and helped, you know, delivering, you know, the packages in line with the project program. But you mentioned, you know, there are lighting control panels. There's hundreds of them. Nobody wants to give up space for these panels, so we had to find strategic positions for each and every one, and that was a challenge. And for example, there's some panels behind the fish tanks in the lobby, some are integrated into the joinery, and then we had to find a way of running the power, the controls cables to the lights. And the success to this was working closely with Light Touch and the contractor to understand the physical, technical limitations, and you can't be just going out inside there yourself to view it in person. So there's some of the challenges that we faced.
Absolutely. And you're actually getting into a very interesting part where Theresa is probably going to give us a lot of good information, which is the construction, right? So how did things change from the moment of the design as things progressed in the construction? Because you mentioned, Liam, yeah, you had to coordinate with the contractor because maybe you need to change locations for the panels, or we need to update a few things, extra things as new restaurants came on board, right? So maybe Theresa, you can give us a little bit of an intro into how complex the construction of this massive hotel went through.
Well, as a site supervision for lighting, what we end up doing is keeping the foremost is to maintain the design intent for lighting, and finding solutions so that the design integrity is maintained. And I'm so thankful for Liam. He and I had a lot of conversations about how the engineering portion and the design portion on the front can come together and make it work. And I'm looking through the pictures of the lobby, and one of the hard coordinations was the LASVIT, all those drops. There are 3 banks of 50 of those glass drops, and they had their own, you know, and it's the collaboration between LASVIT, what LASVIT needs to do, what WSP has engineered, how the contractor is trying to put all the pieces together, let alone the electrical side, just supports in the ceiling. You know, they sometimes didn't allow enough support just to hold the chandeliers, and who is doing what? How much of the electrical and control infrastructure is LASVIT providing with the chandeliers that they've designed versus what the contractor is procuring, and what the infrastructure is that at the time of IFC, how much did we know about bespoke chandeliers that weren't even fully designed yet? We don't know. We're all kind of guessing. So at some point in time, and there was a lot of back and forth with where those boxes were going, how they could be mounted in the ceiling structure that is, you know, dark and ugly up above this beautiful space. And of course, with all the electrical limitations of the LED sources and the drivers and control, there was a lot of back and forth, and it's kind of constant, step by step increments. So you start with, here's the overview, and this is what we know now, this is what we need to achieve, and you work from, it's the way I'd like to work, from the goal of what we need to create and build, and work backwards, and then feed in all the different aspects, and just staying in communication, which was very hard on this project, because there would be times the client would want to change something because of a situation that happened with site construction. Oh, that beam sticks out more than we thought, so now we need to change the interior. Oh, should we light it? But then sometimes they would forget to come up and ask Light Touch, oh, we're going to change this. How does that impact the lighting? So you only find out through a conversation that you're having while you're getting a cup of tea. So that's the other thing is very rare for projects, but the client bought the consultant's time full time. WSP was there even longer full time on the site than Light Touch, and that's same with 40 North. They had representations there too for landscaping that was constantly changing, and especially with landscape, it was really hard to keep up with that because that line of communication was different than what was going on inside the hotel or what was going on inside the residential portion. And there's teams for all of this because it's so huge and there's so many different projects within the project.
How many
So the big,
contractors did you have to deal with, Theresa? Because I'm sure
well,
that
there's
there were different scopes, right?
yeah, there's the main one, and then we had main contractor who then was looking after certain with the whole thing, but electrically speaking, there was one basically for the interior of the residential, there was one for the hotel and everything else, and then the landscape was another contractor and electrical contractor, their subby. So that was 3, and various sundry things happened over the 5 years that I was on site, and there was consolidations, and then people would swap. Oh, you were with that company, now you're with this company. Okay, that's fine. We haven't lost any, brain drain. That because everybody, if you've been on a job site for a long time, everybody knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak. So you want to keep those good people on the job
Definitely.
because it's part of the momentum to keep the project going.
And don't forget, Theresa, about with that one contractor you mentioned. That one contractor had 5 contractors within that one contractor.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
Because of the
and in terms of kitchen consultants and the interior fit out companies that were under ID, and there's different ones for the different restaurants versus the interior of the hotel versus the interior of the residential lobby versus the one that was doing the actual apartments or the one that was doing the actual interiors of the guest rooms. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anybody's there was probably all told, like 50 different kinds of contractors on that job site over the years.
I believe
Maybe
you. I
more. I
believe
have
you.
no idea.
I can't believe we haven't got off the lobby.
Yeah,
And we
Peggy, you
haven't
can, I
talked
mean,
much about landscape yet either.
you can keep going because I was going to pass it on a little bit to John so that he could tell us also about the landscape. But Liam, so a quick question also about coordination. So were you on site pretty much the whole time coordinating with Theresa, or was it
Yeah,
more like from time to time?
yeah. I think it was 2017. April, I think, was my first time on site. And I think Theresa, you were probably, what was it, 2018, wasn't it? I think
June of 2018. Yeah, I
there
came
we
to
go.
Light
She
Touch
remembers the
and got
month even.
chucked. Well, that's because we started, and then I'm like on the job site. I'm like, I have no idea about any of this. A lot of conversations with Sophia and questions and reminding me of the design intent and all the details, which when you look at drawings, I mean, I can look at a pack of drawings and the associated paperwork and get design presentations and get a pretty good idea of what the design is and how things need to happen. But there's all the backstories that you aren't written down in the paperwork that are actually really good to hear. This detail needed to be this way because there's something going on over here that influenced how stuff happened. And that kind of thing, when you're actually on the job site building, it's actually very handy to know because then it's kind of the whole flow and momentum. The reason why this choice was made is because something else happened. And that's where I was constantly calling up Sophia saying, what's going on here?
Yeah, and
And
Theresa and I,
then
we didn't have to call each other. We were sitting,
we're sitting
a
right,
couple of desks apart from each other,
throwing
and
paper airplanes.
the difference, yeah, the difference that made, I think, can't be underestimated. I think.
No, it was
made a
Really
huge
helpful having
Yeah.
everybody, all the consultants on the site.
Definitely.
And they always put us in the same pen and put us in a corner. But it was very good because then if anything came up, I could go to Liam or I could go to the interior designers for the hotel or Carl or whoever was on site from GA for the hotel. And same thing with landscaping. Really, really helpful that we were all there. It's kind of amazing.
And we've actually made it to the pools, and this is a perfect way to get John involved because my understanding is, John, you were involved with all of this magnificent experience of the exterior. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the whole coordination between your team and the Light Touch team to get it to be this fantastic.
Well, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we were involved from really early days. I think we pitched our landscape concept in August of 2014. And once we were selected for the job, it was almost 8 years of work, and obviously COVID played into a lot of that. But the building is such a massive edifice, that when thinking about the landscape and when thinking about the guest experience at the ground level, and not only at the ground level, we're talking 70 different pools and sky courts in each of the suites and the residences. So, I think this one thing that's not lost, but I think the scale of this thing is something, as Paul said, it's like there's 20 projects in this entire thing. And I think that one of the challenges was that the sheer edifice of this thing at 50 or 47 floors or whatever it is. I think that in the landscape, when we in approach to the lighting design, we needed to identify some program, and when you have something this large, one of the things that you're trying to do is get guests from point A to point B in a kind of a process that makes sense and isn't confusing. And so, primary and secondary guest corridors between the hotel and the residences, both sides of the tower, was important. And then once you get into the various pools, we've got a kids pool, a family pool, an adult pool, which is now Nobu by the beach, and then a residence pool. Each of those have kind of got their own lighting levels and their own try and look and feel or mood that we worked with the lighting designers to try and convey. And when you get away from the primary corridor and you get into these pools, you're trying to create these different outdoor living rooms, basically outdoor experiences. And because because it is dark half of the time, it becomes important. And, a lot of these, we had to anticipate, because of, well, the show and the primary food and beverage kind of node that is really on axis with the lobby. We were all talking very early days about the fact that this resort was not just going to be something used during the day, but used at night. And there were going to be people who were off campus visiting the resort hotel at all hours until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. There's nightclubs, there's restaurants, and so I think it was something that we talked about a lot. We sketched a lot. We had a lot of late night conversations about how we were going to approach things. One of the things that I think is different about landscape is that when you hand over a project, a resort hotel, for instance, the best as far as an architect or an interior designer, and even lighting design from one aspect, but when you hand the keys over to the operator, it's really the best it's ever going to look from an interior design and from an architectural point of view. The finishes are perfect. People have been laboring, thousands of people have been laboring over years to get it right, and nobody's had a chance to really screw it up. And landscape is different, and this project is a little bit unique, but landscape is different in that it takes a long time for these trees to mature. And and to really fully envision, we're, as a landscape architect, I'm trying to think 10, 25, 30 years in the future, how are these trees going to look? How is this landscape going to look? It's a little bit different in Dubai in the fact that 75% of what gets planted are palm trees. And we were really lucky in the fact that we had a great client that, we're not buying 1 meter date palms and expecting them to be 20-meter date palms in 20 years. But I think that's one of the big differences, Another one of the, I think, unique things about a project like this is just the scale of it, and obviously with COVID and with the challenges that went with those delays, 8 years. I mean, I think about one of the things I'm most proud of is that when we pitched our scope of work, our concept for what all of these pools ought to be in 2014. A lot of the core ideas, the core concepts that we envisioned actually made it through to the finished product. And I love that because it tells me that my design intent was true. And over 8 years, think about how much these industries or resort hotels or resort design has changed. And so the fact that this thing opened up and it was still, it has won all these awards. It is this project that people are looking to as this iconic, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge resort when a lot of these things were conceived almost a decade ago, I think is really exciting to me.
It is fantastic, yeah, especially because in lighting, at least, I mean, the amount of progress we have made in
Yes,
products and
absolutely.
technology.
The technology has completely changed. And I think one of the strengths of PLD Light Touch is the fact that the technology completely changed the way they convey their design intent from 2014 to right now. Like Paul mentioned, yellow pencil stuff. I remember us doing renderings and literally, one of the blessings of working on a global project where consultants are 12 hours behind you or ahead of you is that the workflow never stops. And so we would issue a drawing and then go to sleep, wake up next morning, you come into the office and PLD Light Touches, they've taken, they've had a full day while I was sleeping or while my team was sleeping to kind of put the design intent, the lighting design intent on top of that. And now things have changed so much as far as modeling, and I can't wait to see what AI and what generative AI software and platforms are going to be able to do. I think it's a real credit to the designers at their companies that so much of these renderings, done 8-10 years ago, you look at side by side with the built project, and the design intent has been conveyed and reflected in the built product. So that's something we're really proud of, for sure.
Yeah, it is, and that's the reason why it's winning awards. And I think this is not going to be the only one that it will win. I'm pretty sure that we will see many, many great things coming out of it. And I know that we could keep on talking for another extra hour about all the details, but unfortunately, we only have 1 hour, and we do have a couple of questions that I want to go through. So Asher first of all, he's congratulating the team. He says, congratulations for winning a truly amazing project. And the question is, which products were used for facades? And he's talking about brands specifically. So maybe Sophia, you can take this one.
Yeah, I think it's actually a very good question, considering also what you just said, that there was the transition of the technology when we started. The fixture were chunky and then they became less and less. But I think we also were very lucky that the client was listening during the tender process, and we were trying to, we had the push to VE, but at the same time, we were trying really to evaluate and to optimize the design in order to still keep specifications. And I think we were very lucky that they did follow through. So, for example, on the facade, if you remember the frame, that's a linear fixture that was just coming out at the time, and linear would actually really put a lot of efforts to, there was a true color coming out that they would although specified was the old one, they would, push and give for the big quantity that is coming, really that new fixture. So in the future also, it's going to be easier to maintain if needed and to be exchanged. Another lucky one we were kind of able to push through, for example, was a fixture from EcoSense. So when you see the columns, and I feel still is a very beautiful element that we were lucky also with the architects to coordinate, is that spot sitting within the column that has like a little niche. So we are emphasizing that sleekness, and that was a 4-degree beam from EcoSense. That was a surface mounted spot that just came out. Another good fixture we were lucky to keep was the Urco, which is for us always Mercedes luxury Porsche. So that one was the unique one that had as an only one at the time, an optic that would shoot deep into the opening of the squares that you see that are sky gardens, courtyards, where we are lighting them from two sides. So that was also something where we have Urco been able to keep, because we were just trying alternatives and they wouldn't deliver. So Martin Architectural is, for example, the projector that does the water effect, and Theresa had a lot to do with them as well. So they are two different typologies because we have two different distances as in proportions. We had also EcoSense on the facade, and we had I think lighting design always loved is AC/DC, which unfortunately is not anymore the company as before, but that had specific fixtures that were not too deep, that were allow us. They have even developed with Paul and us a new kind of optic for the balcony.
You designed that product for them. You designed that for them because the standard one caused too much glare, and we needed something. Correct. Complete that was mounted at an angle, would softly light those partitions on the balconies and not disturb the guest. And I think through trial, you invented a new optic for them, which because we questioned, just even a crossblade louver wouldn't do the job because it created a messy beam on the partition, but a blend of cross beam and a opti lens actually helped that, which is now a standard product throughout. But yeah, I'll give yourself credit for that, Sophia. You virtually developed that product.
All teamwork. So no, it's amazing actually.
There is another question that I think you addressed, Sophia, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Azar also asked if you consider dark sky standards while designing the facade, given that the hotel is in a coastal area. And you mentioned something to that.
Paul was mentioning it. I think from our side, it was always the aim to limit any spill. I think it's best practice now in this region. It's become a topic, let's say, that is we hear it throughout, and that are demands for, and we hope that the clients won't forget once they get in the post-contract stage, because a lot of times then there's other elements in priority. But that one we had also to avoid the visibility of fixtures, glare, spill into rooms. So that was something that from initial stage was considered, and we were doing studies. I mean, dialogues always is one step, but yeah, when you could do backups.
Even the palms with John, because John mentioned earlier about the grown trees, so that's supported with any indirect light into trees. But it is actually a very proud thing that you can look at the crest of the palm, and most of the hotels you will see some form of light spill or glow, but you don't of this one. It actually glows in its own right, as opposed to, and everything is sustained within the building and contained within the landscape, because you look across on the terraces of the F&B and you see the cityscape clearly. You don't get distracted by a cross beam of light from the landscape. There is feature lighting, obviously, in true term is not dark sky considered, well, because it's not feature lighting, it's a show lighting, sorry. But that's a slightly different matter that only goes off once every hour. But from an architectural perspective, I think was very successful with the dark sky consideration.
That is fantastic. Well, as you know, we are right at the hour. I mean, like I said, I know there are so many more details that we could have discussed, but this has been actually quite excellent, and you can tell why you guys won that award. So once again, Congratulations. And I know this is going to be the first of many, if not, if you haven't won any other that I don't know of. But I'm going to wish you lots of luck with any other award submissions that you have. And again, I'm going to thank you all for joining us. This interview has been fantastic, the last one of the year. So a very quick round to all of you. What is your favorite thing about the project? Paul, maybe you can start, and then we
You
will
would
go
go to
around the
me
room.
first, wouldn't you? You would go to me first.
Of course.
We have
You
to
are the
nominate.
head of this team.
We have to nominate one. Well, I have to say, working on fish tanks and the world's biggest jellyfish tank, which wasn't in our original scope, but we were asked to manage it. For me, that was one of my most fun experiences on the job. Learning about how to not make fish crazy and to be complimentary to them and everything else. That was my favorite. So
Fantastic. Sophia, what about you?
I think the people involved. I mean, our team, the design team, we had young people like Ayman working at the time with us. Others like Nelvin, Theresa's support was superb. I feel the people, also obviously the ones we have been coordinating with and designing are, complementing the design with. So all the interior designers, John, the KPF team, it was amazing. I feel to have that opportunity and having people that, try to, because we were growing with every step because it kept changing. So we're kind of evolving with these. It's amazing to have people open-minded to do that. And I think also it's great, the client, when you have someone who actually appreciates what, listens to the consultant engaged. So yeah, thanks to,
Peggy.
I think, everyone here.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely. Peggy, what about you?
I would say I've done quite a number of hotels over the years, but I think this one is an opportunity of a lifetime. It's such a unique experience working with so many talented, creative, highly professional firms, and it was really a very unique experience getting to work with GA Design in London, doing the work sessions there, also meeting up with John in New York. Yeah, it's actually quite an unforgettable experience.
Fantastic. Theresa, what about you? What was your favorite part of the project?
Definitely, we've all talked about working together, which was there was so much support. It's kind of crazy when you're building it because you go from dirt and dust and concrete to building something that I'm just going to share my screen really quickly if I can find the right one. But once you walk through, you come into the conference center porte cochere walkthrough. This was one of those chandeliers that was kind of crazy, working with Lasvit and the client who did the procurement for the FF&E. But when we were in there and cleaning up the coves and focusing little downlights, there's a reception desk on this side and a seating area over here. I was like, wow, and setting levels. This ended up working really well. And then you look through and you go, this is part of the beginning of the pre-function and then further into the pre-function. And one of the other things that I will say is so remarkable about this hotel is the marble. Carl from GA spent months and months and months and months and months choosing marble and doing digital dry lays, and the qualities of marble are truly stunning and amazing. And this is just an example right here. Some of my other favorite marble is in the hotel lifts, the lift corridors. It's blue. It looks like water. We have this water theme again, but it looks like you're at a beach and it's just the small ripples of the ocean coming in. And it's the marble throughout the place was amazing. And it's very hard to light marble because it's so shiny. But that's some of my favorite stuff.
Fantastic. Liam, what about you?
I suppose my answer is kind of twofold. I suppose firstly, I suppose from a technical point of view, I don't know if you know level 22. It's the bridge that I suppose joins the hotel side to the residential side. And that's kind of a nightclub come day pool experience. And I remember when we started trying to design that, we were saying how we're going to get our services our chilled water, our cables, our drainage pipes to that, to those areas. And probably only the people on the project know there's like a labyrinth of corridors beneath that pool deck that you can walk in. And in those corridors, then you've got all your services running along there as well. So yeah, I think that's amazing. Pretty, how we managed to make that happen. And then I think going back to the people, I think we've made friends for life on the project. It's just the people we worked with are just fantastic human beings. And I'm going to share this picture, I think, which kind of sums up, I hope, if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
The involvement, not just the design team as well, but all the contractors, the laborers. And I think, if I remember rightly, I think at peak, there was about 12,000 people working at site at one time as well.
I was sitting about 3/4 back to the right hand side there, if you can see.
Yeah,
Okay,
I see you there, Paul. Yeah, it's a very powerful photograph, I think, or image. I think it was pre-COVID, but I think we, after we got through COVID as well, it got back to where it was. But yeah, the people, I think, and not just the design team, but all the people, laborers.
And you see how many different colors of PPE vests. So that's just, each contractor has their kind of own. It was really amazing.
Yep. Fantastic.
People who made it
Well,
happen.
just to finish this off, John, what was your favorite part?
I think Sophia nailed it. It's with every project for me, it's the people. It's the different, the different people you get to meet and work with. And, there are times when we go through in a project like this where you're completely worn out and drained and sick of changing things. But one of the things that I take away from it is that you look around and you realize that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who are in the same boat, and it really is just a pleasure to work with a group of professionals that with a client like ICD or Kerzner. Over 30 years, they always assemble the most talented people on the planet to pull a project across the finish line. And I love that. I just love, once a project's finished for me, I kind of move on to the next one. And hopefully the dealings that I've had with various people leads to the next project and a new experience. And I just feel really lucky to work with these people. I think Sophia nailed it. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. Paul, one last question for you, but I don't think you will have time to answer it. Jordan asked, how was the Beyonce party like? So you can probably catch up with him and let him know.
It was very good. It was very good. And it was really good fun. It was a bit daunting, actually. It was a bit, but it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
I thought you were going to say your favorite part of everything was Beyonce, but hey,
Well, it's I actually forgot about it, and it was actually it was more. Do you know what? It was more to do with I was more scared going up to that party, bearing in mind it was a launch party, about the project than I was excited about the event. Believe it or not,
because we hadn't even finished fully commissioning things at that point.
Well, I was panicking.
I spent another 3 months commissioning. Yeah.
Interesting. Look at that. One more detail. Well, everybody, we are way over the hour, but I want to thank you all for taking the time. It was super interesting to hear you all, talk about all of these details. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much for staying with us. This was fantastic. Keep an eye on LinkedIn just for, any news and updates for anything that's coming up. And I wish you all a good afternoon, a good day for the ones that are not in Dubai, and stay safe and dry. And see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye.